Doing a little hazelnut latte this morning, everybody. Hey, Steve here from The Varied Life. And if you would take a moment, if you're watching this on YouTube, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and you will be a good person in my heart. And good feelings and vibes go out to you all. So appreciate that. If you're watching this on Facebook, go to YouTube, subscribe to The Varied Life, and give it a like as well. I would appreciate that. And or leave comments on this video. With that being said, again, my name is Steve, and I'm retired here in Korea. We've been here almost 2 years now. We retired early because overseas retirement in certain countries, expenses are a lot less, and that allowed us to retire early, that's a bonus. It worked out really well. So anyway, today we're going to talk about COVID. I know, nobody wants to talk about COVID because nobody likes it. And first of all, who's at fault? The United States, because, well, not the United States, not me or you if you're an American citizen, but organizations and government entities within the United States funded the Wuhan labs in China, and it got released. So thank you, Dr. Fauci, for, all of that. This is very interesting because what we're seeing now is here in Korea, and I think what we're going to end up seeing, unfortunately, in many other parts of the world, is more COVID. And unfortunately, here in Korea, let's see if we can go to this. Okay, there we go. The number of COVID-19 patients surges sixfold within 4 weeks. And I'm not a big COVID person. I had COVID a number of times, and I kind of knew it was BS when the government said, remember Biden said, well, if you get the COVID vaccine, you'll never get COVID. Or remember Fauci saying that, or remember Kamala saying that, and other people, if you get it, but then there's the booster shots, and it's like, well, you need the booster shots so that you don't get COVID. And it's like, well, wait a second. You said if you just get the initial vaccine, you won't get COVID. And then we ended up with people who had the initial vaccine and multiple boosters, 4 or 5 different boosters, and those people still got COVID. So it's not good. But here in Korea, what we end up seeing is the number of patients admitted to hospitals. 220 hospitals nationwide here in Korea for COVID came up to 861 in the first week of August, the highest level since February, according to the Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency. The rapidly growing figure in the 148 in the second week of July to 226 in the third week and 475 in the following week. Oh, please don't let there be another lockdown. But the good thing is we're not seeing as bad of symptoms and as with the debacle we had with the other COVID. The authorities have expected such an uptrend to continue through the end of this month. It seems the latest wave is sparked by the KP3 subvariant, the fast-spreading Omicron variant, which accounted for 45.5% of the total cases in July. One of the inpatients this month, 65.2% were those who were 65 and older, followed by 18% of those who were 50 to 64, which I'm going to be 58 here pretty damn soon. Now, here's the good news, that despite the surge in the number of patients, more than 90% of them suffer minor symptoms, and the country is able to handle the situation under the current medical system. We're going to talk about the current medical system and the doctor strike that is going on, that is still going on, that has just surprisingly been disappeared from the news. It's kind of gone to page 9 in the back, and nobody really talks about it anymore. So anyway, the Korean government is going to beef up monitoring of senior citizens and double the efforts to get supplies and so on and so forth for high-risk groups. They're also going to resume vaccination campaign in October, where high-risk groups will be administered vaccines for free. I don't know what your feeling is on that, but considering that all the other vaccines didn't really seem to work really well, and except for making the vaccine companies a ton of money, I don't think I'm going to go that route. It's the flu, but if the U.S. government or portions of the U.S. government didn't fund the COVID-19 research and study and efficacy usage and pay, all of that whole debacle thing, we wouldn't be going through this right now. So the two I blame are the United States government, and the second I blame the Chinese, not the Chinese people, but just a certain part of their government that allowed such craziness to go on. So anyway, we got that going on. That's kind of interesting. The doctor strike, which is going on, and this is kind of interesting because training doctors show little signs of returning to hospitals as hospitals are set to accept their resignations. Now, for those of you who don't know, it ends up that here in Korea, there, like I said in the previous article, there's like 220 plus hospitals. And then that doesn't count the clinics and private practices and things like that here in Korea. The majority of these are for-profit hospitals. And a lot of these hospitals are training hospitals. In other words, they're hospitals to where medical students will go after graduation to do their residency and learn how to be a doctor. They work under another doctor who works under another doctor, and eventually they learn all the particulars about being that specific type of doctor, and they pass their boards, and boom, they're a doctor. The problem is that Korea hasn't increased the number of doctors here in Korea for the last, you're not going to believe this, 27 years. Yeah, 27 years. Last 27 years, the Korean Medical Association has not increase the number of doctors in Korea, which is astounding because we have an ever-aging population and we didn't have enough doctors to begin with. Of course, I haven't been here the whole 27 years, but every time the government has wanted to increase the roles or the number of students going to medical school, the Korean Medical Association has said, no, we're not going to do it, we're going to strike, and they do strike. And what's unfortunate is that whatever administration it pops up in, they just kick the can down the road and they bend to the unions and okay, well, we won't raise, and we're not talking a huge amount of people. We're talking like 2,000 amongst, there's like 50 medical schools here in Korea, or 20 or 50, something like that. So really in the grand scheme of things, and if you look at all the training hospitals and you look at the number of doctors that would be increase in departments would be like maybe one or two, maybe. But at the same time, the Korean Doctors Association is complaining about being overworked, and they are. Experiencing Korean medical firsthand here in Korea, it is overwhelmed, and you will have doctors that will see 100, 150 patients a day. It is kind of like a conveyor belt, a boom, 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 boom. The KMA's own documentation and reports show that doctors spend maybe 3 or 4 minutes with each patient, and then they go on to the next one. You might have multiple doctors. You don't have PCMs here in Korea, or primary care managers, or a family doctor. That could alleviate a lot of the burden. It's just amazing. But they won't increase the number because here's what the Korean Medical Association has said, is that it'll create too much competition. It'll lower the prestige of doctors. And there's not enough of that to go around. And if you have more doctors, you'll have less prestige for the current doctors. That's an actual excuse that they gave. And then they said that it would undermine and destroy the current medical system that they have. How? I don't understand. It's the same rhetoric that's been going on year in and year out, every time they do the strike. And the government wants to increase doctors. They want to increase doctors in rural areas. And for some reason, the KMA, no, we can't do that. So people are at, I guess you could call it like like there's food deserts. That was kind of a phrase where there's not a lot of food in certain areas. Well, there's doctor deserts here in Korea, where in rural areas, there's not a lot of clinics and there's not a lot of good hospitals. So the good hospitals are in Seoul, basically everything revolves around Seoul. So yeah, if something really, really bad happens to me, I'm going to go to Seoul and I'm going to go to Samsung Medical Center or one of the other top 5 hospitals to get care because they have the best care, the best funding, and they're also teaching hospitals. But the KMA doesn't want that, so they went on strike. So like 10,000 resident doctors quit. They turned in their letters of resignation, but those letters haven't been accepted by the hospitals that are for-profit hospitals, and they're just silent on this. Now, there was one time where they said they're losing, a hospital's losing like $700,000 or $800,000 a day because of this, the backup of appointments, people not getting surgeries and things like this. That's insane. And so now they were overworked before, and now they're severely overworked, and yet the KMA never offers any workable solutions. And you can have an opposing view. I totally get that, but at least provide some common sense things to say, okay, well, you are being overworked. If more doctors is not the answer, how are you going to combat? And what is the answer to all this overwork that you're complaining about? They're silent. They never answer. Nobody asks. That's even the more damning thing is that none of the Korean media centers ever, no reporter ever asked that question to the KMA representatives. So yeah, it's all a weird thing going on. So anyway, it ends up that they're still not going to return, which is weird. Let me get this out of the way. Which is totally weird. So, they're not going to return to work, despite the government's proposal of an olive branch to end the prolonged walkout, accepting resignations to help training doctors who have left their work site since late February in protest of the government's medical reform find jobs at other hospitals. Monday deadline is, I don't know how if you haven't finished your residency, now I know this because our daughter's a doctor, if you haven't finished residency, you haven't taken your boards, and you haven't been certified as an official doctor in that field, how can you go find a job at another hospital? You have to make up that time. If you leave for whatever reason for an extended period of time, you have to make up that time and basically restart your residency. Crazy. The Monday deadline. And now this is amazing because this article was back in July 15th. So there it is, July 15th. And here it is, return to hospital and timetable to hire doctors back in this September, which is right around the corner because it's August. If training doctors do not respond to the move by accepting their resignations by the deadline, they will automatically be resigned according to government officials. But then the government before said, hey, what we're going to do is if you're going to go on strike, we're going to fine you. We're going to, all the way up to, you have to redo your residency and so on and so forth. And nobody ever, we're going to take away your license is one of the worst things it could do. So there's a tiered system of punishment because this is affecting the nation, which is in their laws. And nobody's doing nothing. It's absolutely crazy. So the government and the administration in charge threw down the gauntlet, and basically they tried to bluff, and the union said, nope, we're not going to do it. And so now it's a stalemate. But now they're saying that the government, if they don't accept it by the deadline, the government is going to resign these doctors. And so they'll no longer be able to practice medicine in Korea. And here's another interesting thing. If they do this, they can't practice medicine in another country. Yeah, because you have to get permission from the Korean government if you're a Korean citizen to go do this. Yeah, so this is actually crazy. It remains to be seen how many striking trainee doctors will return to work. Trainee doctors submitted his resignation. Excuse me. A trainee doctor who submitted a resignation at a hospital in Seoul said most junior doctors, residents, that's what they call them, seem to be blasé to the government's proposal. A professor at a state-run hospital also said there's little signs that most trainee doctors would return to work. How are they paying their bills? How are they paying their student loans? How are they surviving? I don't get it, because they're not working. You're not getting paid, as far as I know. And the Korean Medical Association is not like slipping the money under the table to, make it through this hard time during the strike. It's just a weird thing. If it ends up that these, and I've said this before in the past, if these doctors, resident doctors, do get fired and resign, the KMA is not going to give them anything. It's not like they're going to give them a stipend and say, oh, well, we're going to help you out. Here's some severance pay. No, they're just out on their own. So I find this really weird that these resident doctors would stick to this strike without any concern towards their future, and the KMA doesn't have their back. And even, how much can you have somebody's back if you end up, you're working as a doctor towards becoming a doctor, and a union says, okay, it's time to go on strike, and you say, yes, solidarity, we should strike, and it's bad, we don't want more doctors, which is asinine in my opinion, evident by all the overwork and so on and so forth. I just don't get it. And then worst case scenarios, I've said in other videos, if they do get their licenses pulled and they can't practice medicine ever again, is the Korean Medical Association, the union, going to have the backs of these people? No, it's not like they're going to say, oh, we're going to pay you money to strike and, we'll be solidarity and we'll help you out. No, it's like you're out on your own. You just went through 4 years of pre-med. You went through 4 years of medical school, so that's 8 years right there. Maybe you did a couple more years, so it could be 8 to 10 years. And then usually for residency, at least 3 years, maybe, and depending on the type of doctor you are, it could be 8 or 10 years of residency. So you're looking at, 10, 12, 15 years of work towards becoming a doctor, and you're just going to throw that away, and what are you going to do? Deliver ramen? You can't work as a doctor. So what are you going to do now? Yeah, it's absolutely insane. So anyway, little signs of these people. More than 12,000 training doctors, over 90% of the total, have been on strike in the form of mass resignation since February 20th. And this has caused so many problems. Last week, the government decided to withdraw all punitive measures against training doctors defying return to work orders. So again, when we talked about this, they had this tiered level of punishment that if, kind of like you had the carrot, which was, if you come back to work, we'll work with you and do this, but we need, for the sake of the Korean people, because Koreans are dying and it's affecting expats and retirees and things like that here in Korea, people not getting chemo, people not getting surgeries, people dying because there's not enough doctors because of the strike. So there's these punitive measures, and now they said, we were joking, we were bluffing, just come back to work, please. That's essentially what they're doing. It just really shows how, the union have won this. It also allowed training doctors to reapply at training programs starting in September to receive special treatment, such as an exemption from the rule prohibiting repeat applications to a department within the same year. This is interesting that, so they're going to redo their residency? So they have to redo everything? Or are they going to bend over and say, oh, no more doctors. Yeah, we can't have an increase in doctors. Oh, by the way, all of the time that you spent away not learning how to be a doctor, we're just going to scrap that? And are you going to have to redo your entire residency, or are we just going to kind of massage things and bend the knee to the unions? I don't know. Meanwhile, medical professors criticize the government for allowing hospitals to automatically accept the resignation of junior doctors. Medical professors are the kind of like the head doctors that oversee all the other ones. If you don't work, if you haven't worked, see, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, if you haven't worked for 6 months, you think you should be getting paid? You think that if you're gone for 6 months that, yeah, you're gone and we're not going to hold your spot because we're a for-profit hospital and that's cutting our bottom line? Yeah, I would let you go. But we're not in the United States. We're in Korea. They said processing resignations unilaterally without receiving responses from individual training doctors on their intention to return or quit will only deteriorate the situation, 3 groups of medical professors said in a joint statement. Deteriorate the situation. People are dying because doctors are on strike. How much more deteriorating can you get? Oh, the prestige that I have as a doctor, I won't get as much prestige if we have more doctors because I have to share the prestige. Seriously, that's what the KMA said. So, yeah, it is absolutely insane on what is going on with this doctor strike. And it's amazing that it's not going anywhere. I had hopes that the current administration would nip this in the bud, but apparently, no. They turned around and head down, ass up, and just, it's bad. Next thing we're going to take a look at is number of suicides in Korea. It jumps to 10.1% in January through May. This is number of Koreans taking their own lives jumped 10.1% in the January to May period. Government data showed Tuesday a total of 6,375 people committed suicide in the first 5 months of the year, compared with an estimated 13,770 of all of 2023. So in other words, there's been this huge uptick in suicides that may be attributed to social isolation, economic hardship, depression in the aftermath of COVID-19 pandemic. Bad economy, recession, inflation, all of that stuff. And then there's also the aspect of trying to keep up with the Joneses in the insane work hours that a lot of Koreans do to be able to get the money to survive and live. And Koreans have such a huge focus and emphasis on education that it is insane. My wife is Korean, and she remembers going to school and going from 6 o'clock in the morning, and then she wouldn't get home until 9, 10 o'clock because she'd study and all that stuff, and then maybe go to bed at 11 at night, and then get up at the same thing early, do whatever chores, and then go to school. Hours and hours. And then entrance exams for high school or college is insane here in Korea. Huge upticks in suicide rates because the amount of time that they spend studying is insane. And if you look at some of the videos that they have, there was a video that had a group of Korean high school students and then some UK high school students, and they gave them a math test. And because math is kind of a numbers thing, so you don't need to know the language. And then the Korean high school students did the math thing, and boom, it was super easy. The UK high school kids thought it was the hardest thing that they ever did in their life, and the Korean kids are like, yeah, that's easy. We do that in middle school, So they cram a lot of education into Koreans, which is good, but I think they go overboard a little bit, and that results in a lot of people trying to attain this level of perfection that cannot be attained. And it's detrimental to the mental health of a lot of people. So yeah, it's and there's also so-called copycat suicide that may be a factor of a famous person commit suicide in December last year. So the fanboys and fangirls of some K-pop or movie star or singer or whatever commit suicide. Oh, I can't live without my favorite pop star, and then they kill themselves. People need to learn how to be themselves and how not to have their identity tied to somebody else that's not them. I'm just saying. Korea's suicide rate was the highest among the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development members, reporting 24.1 cases for every 100,000 people. As of 2020, over twice the average of 10.7. On Tuesday, the ministry held a meeting of relevant ministries and civic groups to discuss measures to prevent people from taking their own lives. Yeah, it's not a good thing when suicide pops up, and that seems to be your only seems to be your only out. As somebody who has dealt with having some very dark times and things like that, I totally get it, but it's not the way to go. And unfortunately, in Korea, with this keeping up with the Joneses or keeping up with the Kims, and you got to have the new car, you got to have the new clothes, and you have this ever increasing debt that you have, and there's a lot of materialism here in Korea. There's a lot that's tied to plastic surgery. It's kind of like the plastic surgery capital of the world. Huge medical tourism in regards to that. And there's people that will have their kids buy $200 or $300 shirts, and the kid's like a toddler. You don't need $100 or $50 shirt for a toddler for some name brand, so the neighbors think that you're rich. The kid doesn't care. You have parents of children that are buying brand new cars every year because they don't want the other kids to make fun of their kids if they're driving an older model car. It's actually a thing here. And yeah, if you don't have the new bag, you don't have the new phone, if you don't have the new clothes, and you don't take trips and this and that, and doing all the things that shakers and movers do, you only live once, and you have to reach this level of materialism, in other words, to make it and be happy. And people are realizing sometimes it's not worth it, and they commit suicide, which we just saw. And then we also see that these same people that are engaged in this destructive behavior of materialism. Now, materialism can be good because you need some materials to live. It's and enjoy life. You should have some hobbies and things like that. But when you go overboard to the point of where you're increasing your consumer debt and you can't pay it back, and you're putting off your retirement savings so that, you probably won't be able to retire, and you'll be one of those Koreans that is out collecting cardboard boxes that you see every once in a while, it's not good. Now, you might be asking, what is this Korean collecting cardboard box thing? Well, it ends up that you have a lot of older Koreans, you'll notice, and most of them are women. You do see some men that will have big carts, and they will go around to trash cans, and they'll take out the cardboard and put it on their cart, and they go around and make their rounds, and they'll have huge giant stacks of cardboard on their little things that they're pulling around. And these people are old. I'm going to be 58 this year, but these people are old. They're in their 60s, they're in their 70s, and the reason they're collecting the cardboard is because they take it to recycling centers to get money because they don't make enough money to survive off of the government pension system. And a lot of people, I've done videos talking about in the past where a lot of Koreans are kind of like Americans, and they're not saving enough for retirement. Yeah, it's kind of what we're seeing in the United States. 75% of the people in the United States don't think that they're going to be able to retire. They're putting off retirement, and they're just going to be working until they die. So, the average person in the United States, I saw one report talking about how they only had like $43,000 saved for retirement. And these are people my age who are getting on the cusp of getting ready to retire. And they only have like 40 grand. Kind of similar to what we see here in Korea. So anyway, we got that going on. The other thing we'll kind of leave on a good parting note is with the ever-increasing population here in Korea, the aging population. I think it's up like 20%, 14 or 20% of the population is aging, and they're getting older, and kind of like in the United States, huge segments of the society are getting older, and the younger generations aren't procreating as much as the older generations did, and so now we have a negative birth rate here in Korea. I think the last stat I saw on that was 0.7, so 0.72 or something like that. So they're not procreating to replenish the population. They're behind. And so is Japan and some other countries, because people are just like, yeah, that's not the. It used to be the dream of going to school, getting into a good college, getting a good job, punching the clock, getting your pension, having a family, the 2 kids and the dog and whatever, and then retiring. People are finding out that they can't afford to do that because they latched on to the materialism thing of it, and they're not saving for retirement, and it takes too much money to raise a kid, so we're not going to have kids, and you only live once. I don't care about kids, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, that's how it goes. So caregivers here in Korea. Amid Korea's declining birth rate and aging population, 100 caregivers from the Philippines arrived in Seoul for a 6-month pilot program. If the program proves successful, the government plans to initiate 1,200 caregivers over the next year. They will have some feedbacks before arriving in Korea. The caregivers went under 780 hours of training and passed drug screening and criminal background checks. They are between 24 and 38 years old and hold a care certificate from the Philippine government. So they've been trained in things like this. And I've actually seen they've also passed a Korean language test required by the Korean government. Given that English is one of the primary languages, their proficiency in that language is highly anticipated by Korean households known for their educational enthusiasm. The service is open to households in Seoul with children aged 12 or younger and for expecting parents. So this is kind of interesting. They're starting to outsource care because care in Korea is too expensive by Koreans, and so they're going to bring in Filipinos. Covered by the minimum wage and eligibility for 4 types of insurance in Korea, these caregivers earn 2.38 million won, or about $1,700 a month, if employed for 8 hours a day. This amount is about half the median income for a 30-something Korean household, which is 5.09 million. What does that say? If they work 4 hours a day, their monthly pay would be 1.9 million won. Despite initial concerns about affordability, the Seoul government and the labor ministry said that a total of 751 households applied for caregivers. However, caregivers who will live in shared housing are restricted to specific household tasks, which led to the perception that their wages in Korea are higher than those in Hong Kong or Singapore. There has been a little bit of scuttlebutt on this because they're saying that they're going to get paid less than what Koreans doing the same job would do. I don't know how true that is, but I saw that on a couple of blogs. And I actually saw some videos of some Filipinos who were caregivers that are in the program and coming to Korea. And of course, they spoke in Korea and things like that. And there's a little translation thing. And they spoke Korean pretty well. So yeah, it's definitely a thing. And just like Korea has outsourced a lot of manual labor, is continuing to outsource a lot of manual labor, we're going to continue to see this in regards to healthcare, and definitely with caregivers, which is geared towards families of young children and so on and so forth, kind of being that nanny type of thing. But I think what we'll end up seeing is probably more of this in the future, as we do in other countries, for older populations. Yeah, it's going to be really, really interesting. Where is it? As a member of the International Labor Organization, Korea is required to pay the same minimum wage for both domestic and foreign workers. However, different countries have varying requirements for caregivers, so direct wage compensations or comparisons is not entirely persuasive. So that's where those blogs I was telling you about. It's kind of like it depends on what you do and how much you do and so on and so forth. But if you work so many hours a day, somebody brought up that, yeah, there was a little bit of difference in the pay. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. So anyway, this effort, given only a small portion of households will benefit from foreign caregiver program, there may be a need for the government, businesses, and labor sector to consider more flexible social options, including varying the application of the minimum wage. Korea is transitioning to an aging society as rapidly as its economic growth once did. The country's total fertility rate is 0.72 this year, a drop in birth rate, kind of like Japan. And despite this, more women are choosing to stay in the workforce because they can't afford it. Consequently, the shortage of caregiving labor, which was 190,000 in 2022, is projected to soar between 610,000 and 1.55 million by 2042, according to the figures of the Bank of Korea. Currently, only 30% of this shortage is being addressed. So, yeah, like I said, pretty much every country is going to have an aging population, and you're going to need more caregivers. So, with that being said, it's going to get really interesting. When caregivers begin to work this September, there could be potential issues regarding scope of household tasks that they're allowed to perform. Korean applications for the program outline specific duties that caregivers cannot undertake, such as cooking, waste management, and unrelated to childcare. However, the ambiguity in these guidelines may lead to challenges, as many foreign workers might feel compelled to comply with unclear or potentially unreasonable requests from employers. The extent of the tasks they can perform may also vary depending on the number of hours they work. Korean labor groups have emphasized the need for foreign caregivers to have access to support mechanisms for resolving any workplace issues they may encounter. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that works out in the next, coming up in September. So, a lot of stuff comes up here in Korea. Between the COVID, the doctor strike, which is supposedly going to end in September if they come back, but I don't see that happening. And I really just don't understand how the doctors can continue to be on strike. How are they surviving? I don't get it. And this doesn't even address the medical schools that have medical school students that went on strike with the doctors, and a lot of those haven't returned back to school either. So how are they paying their student loans? Is it just put on pause? I don't understand. The increase in COVID, the flu season, cold and flu, Fauci, Chinese government, bad, not good. Suicide's bad. Don't do it. It's not worth it. Especially as somebody who's dealt with a lot of mental health issues, I can tell you, it's tempting, but don't. There's so much help that you can get, and I highly suggest getting therapy and help because. Yeah, it's not worth it. And then the caregiver thing, and since I'm getting older, that's another consideration for people who retire overseas, is what do it's great to retire early, be on the beach, sipping the Mai Tais, drinking the beers and all that stuff. But really when it gets down to it, you're going to eventually get older and you might need living assisted care. So where you go, do they have and offer that, and what is the price? So that's something else to take in consideration. So anyway, with that being said, being retired here in Korea for almost 2 years, and then we were retired before that, but we were in Oahu and visiting our daughter. So that was really cool. But yeah, other places that we're considering is maybe the Philippines because it's cheaper than Hawaii and they got some awesome beaches. Definitely want to take a trip there. Maybe 1 or 2 trips, but maybe have that as a possible backup retiree visa destination. And worst case scenario, something happens here in Korea, we could always just go to the Philippines if we have that, or some other country. But the Philippines is close by. It's like, 4 or 6 hours away, something like that. But probably what will happen is that we will go to the Philippines during the winter, here in Korea, because it's miserable here, and hey, spend a month in the Philippines on the beach and enjoy the good weather and the beaches. Maybe we'll be the snowbirds and do that. Yeah. So anyway, that's what we got going on. What do you think about the information that I put out and what's going on in Korea? Doctor strike, COVID. Is COVID popping up where you're at? I don't know about I don't know how you feel about the vaccines and all that stuff, but whether you're for or against them, put your comments in the comment section down below. Do you think this is going to be a continuing problem, or kind of like what we saw in this article, is it just the flu and with some minor symptoms, and it's like we don't need to be scared like we were when we shut down the entire planet for the flu? Yeah. Also, are you getting to retire? And if you are you planning to retire in the United States, or are you considering another country? And what state within the United states are you planning to retire in if you're going to stay stateside? Put that in the comment section down below, and I'd like to read those as well. And I don't know, anything else? I think that's it. So with that being said, I think we are done for the day. Yes, we are done. So with that being said, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. I would appreciate that. And we will see you on the next video. Peace. Good stuff.